Big Shaq had always been known for his larger-than-life personality, humor, and bold antics. But this time he wanted to do something different. Instead of performing on stage or creating music that made people laugh, he wanted to step into the real world in a way that no one would expect. He had been thinking for a while about how people behave when they think no one is watching, or when they don't know who someone truly is. It fascinated him because, in everyday life, appearances often shape the way people act. Celebrities are usually treated differently, given respect, attention, or kindness simply because of their fame. But what happens when the fame is stripped away? When people don't know who you are? Big Shaq was determined to find out. The idea came to him one quiet evening while sitting in his office, scrolling through social media. He noticed countless videos of social experiments where ordinary people reacted differently in various situations. Some experiments were funny, some heartwarming, and some downright shocking. But what caught his attention most was the way people treated someone they believed to be less fortunate. There were videos of homeless individuals facing rudeness, being ignored, or sometimes being treated with kindness and generosity. Big Shaq realized that he could take this concept a step further. He could combine his curiosity with his own world, his own restaurant, and see the reactions firsthand. The more he thought about it, the more the plan seemed perfect. Instead of testing strangers randomly on the street, he could test human behavior in a place where he had control, but where people would have no clue about his presence. His own restaurant became the perfect setting. It was a place he knew well, a place where people came to enjoy food and good service. But he wondered, would the same people who smiled at him or treated him like a star behave differently if they didn't recognize him? Would they be polite, kind, or dismissive? These questions excited him and made him even more determined. Big Shaq also realized that this experiment could be more than just entertainment. It could send a message about respect, kindness, and how we treat people in our daily lives. Often people think that politeness is only necessary when someone important is around. He wanted to challenge that idea. If people are genuinely kind, it shouldn't matter who is watching or who is being served. He wanted to reveal not only the good, but also the harsh realities of human behavior in a surprising way. Planning this idea wasn't as simple as it sounded. Big Shaq spent hours thinking about how he could disguise himself convincingly. He needed to look like someone ordinary, someone who would not catch the attention of his staff or restaurant guests. He knew that even a small detail could give him away. From scruffy clothes to a tired demeanor, every element had to be just right. He even thought about how he would act, walk, and speak so that no one would suspect who he really was. The preparation itself became an exciting part of the idea, because it felt like stepping into a completely different life, even if only for a short while. The idea was thrilling to him because it combined several elements he loved: humor, curiosity, and social observation. He could secretly watch real human reactions, record them, and share the experience with the world. But beyond the thrill, he felt a sense of responsibility. This was not about pranking people or making fun of anyone. It was about uncovering the truth of how people act when no one knows their identity. Could a person's manners change based on appearances alone? Could people be surprisingly kind or shockingly rude when the social mask of celebrity is removed? These questions kept buzzing in his mind and pushed him to move forward. Even as he imagined the scene in his head, Big Shaq felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. What if people treated him badly? What if staff members were rude? Or worse, what if he missed seeing something important because people guessed who he was? Despite these worries, he couldn't ignore the curiosity and drive that this idea gave him. It was bold, it was daring, and it was uniquely Big Shaq. He knew that the results could be surprising, entertaining, and meaningful all at once. By the end of that evening, the idea had taken full shape in his mind. Big Shaq wasn't just thinking about a social experiment. He was thinking about an adventure, a story that could make people laugh, reflect, and maybe even reconsider how they treat others in everyday life. The idea was simple in concept but layered in meaning. It combined humor, reality, human psychology, and a touch of suspense, all elements that made it irresistible. That night, he decided that he wouldn't just think about it, he would act on it. The plan to go undercover as a homeless person and visit his own restaurant was set in motion, and the journey to uncover the truth about politeness, respect, and human behavior was about to begin. Big Shaq knew that the success of his undercover experiment depended entirely on one thing: his disguise. If anyone recognized him, the whole plan would fall apart, and the reactions he hoped to observe would be meaningless. So he approached this stage with the precision of a movie character preparing for a heist. It wasn't just about wearing different clothes. It was about becoming someone else entirely. He wanted to blend into the background, to be invisible in plain sight, and to feel the world from a perspective that was completely unfamiliar to him. He started with the basics. Gone were his signature flashy jackets, designer sneakers, and perfectly styled hair. In their place, he chose worn-out shoes that had seen better days, a hoodie with small stains, and a jacket that hung loosely on his frame. He even went a step further, adding a slightly torn backpack and a cap pulled low over his eyes to hide his face. Every piece of clothing had a purpose: to create a believable persona of someone who had nowhere to go and was just another face in the crowd. But the disguise wasn't only about clothes. Big Shaq studied the way homeless individuals moved, sat, and interacted in public spaces. He practiced walking slowly, dragging his feet slightly and holding his shoulders in a slouched posture. He even practiced lowering his gaze in certain moments, pausing awkwardly when he passed groups of people and muttering to himself in a subtle way that seemed natural, but not suspicious. He wanted to act as convincingly as possible, so every detail, no matter how small, mattered. He also thought about his voice. Big Shaq was known for his booming, confident tone, but in this disguise he softened it. He practiced speaking quietly and hesitantly, as if he were trying not to draw attention. Even his laughter was subdued, controlled, and rare. This voice became another layer of the character he was about to embody. Preparation extended beyond appearance and behavior. Big Shaq visited the restaurant multiple times in advance, not as himself, but as a careful observer. He memorized the flow of the restaurant, the seating arrangements, the staff routines, and the busiest hours. He wanted to know exactly where to position himself, so he could watch both employees and customers without being noticed. Every angle, every corner, and every table placement was analyzed to make sure he could capture genuine, unfiltered reactions. Even the timing of his visit was carefully planned. He didn't want the restaurant to be too empty or too crowded. He wanted a mix of casual diners and regulars, so he could see a wide range of human behavior. Big Shaq imagined different scenarios: a server rushing past him, a customer glancing at him with curiosity, or someone ignoring him completely. The anticipation of these moments made the preparation feel like setting up a suspenseful scene in a movie, where every detail could affect the outcome. By the end of his preparation, Big Shaq felt a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. He wasn't just putting on a costume. He was stepping into a completely different world, even if only for a few hours. The disguise wasn't about fooling people for laughs. It was about understanding human nature, seeing how people really acted when fame and appearances were stripped away. With every piece of clothing, every practiced movement, and every carefully considered detail, he built the persona he would become, ready to face the unknown reactions of the world he thought he knew so well. The day had finally arrived. Big Shaq adjusted his cap, tugged at the sleeves of his worn hoodie, and took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. The restaurant stood ahead, familiar yet strangely intimidating from the perspective of someone no one would recognize. Today, he wasn't the celebrity, the performer, or the owner. He was just another person blending into the world, unnoticed and ordinary. His heart raced with excitement and a hint of nervousness. Every step toward the entrance felt like stepping onto a stage, but this was a stage without scripts, cameras, or rehearsals. As he approached the door, he reminded himself to act natural. Every movement, every glance had to match the persona he had spent weeks preparing. He shuffled his feet slightly, glanced at the menu on the outside wall with mild curiosity, and muttered under his breath as if unsure of what to order. He avoided eye contact, letting his gaze drift to the floor, and tried to embody the uncertainty of someone who felt invisible to the world. The moment he stepped inside, the familiar scent of freshly cooked food and warm bread hit him, but he ignored it, focusing instead on the reactions of people around him. He observed the staff, the regular patrons, and even the occasional passerby peeking in. His disguise seemed to work. No one recognized him, and the restaurant appeared to continue in its normal rhythm, completely unaware that the owner, famous in another life, was now one of the unnoticed. He chose a corner table, one that gave him a clear view of the entire restaurant without drawing attention. From this vantage point, he could watch the interactions unfold. Servers greeting guests, people chatting and laughing, and the subtle nuances of human behavior that often go unnoticed. Big Shaq realized that the restaurant, a place he had seen thousands of times, now felt like an entirely new world. Each smile, glance, and gesture became a small clue in the larger experiment he had embarked upon. When a server approached him, he hesitated slightly before speaking, testing the waters of politeness and attention. Would they greet him warmly, or would they treat him with indifference? As the interaction began, he noted every detail, the tone of voice, the speed of service, the fleeting expressions that revealed thoughts the words couldn't convey. Every small action became a window into how people truly behaved when they didn't know who he was. Even the customers fascinated him. He saw some leaning forward to hold doors open, offering kind gestures to others while some ignored him completely, buried in their conversations and screens. It was a mix of politeness, rudeness, and indifference, a spectrum of human behavior that was far more revealing than he had imagined. He realized that being invisible allowed him to see the unfiltered version of people, stripped of masks, titles, or expectations. As he sipped on a modest drink and observed quietly, Big Shaq felt a strange mix of satisfaction and anticipation. The real experiment had begun, and every passing moment promised new insights. He wasn't just watching a restaurant. He was watching the human heart, its kindness, its impatience, and its unpredictability, all unfolding in real time. The undercover adventure had truly begun, and Big Shaq was ready to witness the shocking truths hidden behind polite smiles and casual greetings. Big Shaq settled into his corner seat, trying to make himself as small and unnoticeable as possible. At first everything seemed ordinary, plates clinking, soft chatter, and the faint hum of background music. But as he began observing more closely, the subtle nuances of human behavior started to emerge, and he realized that even the smallest interactions could reveal a lot about people. The first encounter came when a young server approached him with a menu. She smiled politely at the other tables but barely glanced in his direction. Her tone was curt, almost rushed, as she asked if he wanted anything to drink. Big Shaq felt a twinge of surprise. This was someone who normally greeted him warmly when he visited the restaurant as a celebrity. The difference was startling yet fascinating. He was seeing the invisible treatment that ordinary people often receive. As he scanned the room, he noticed a family seated nearby. They were chatting, laughing, and completely absorbed in themselves. When Big Shaq subtly made eye contact with the little boy who looked curiously at him, the parents barely acknowledged the interaction. It wasn't just indifference. It was a subtle form of rudeness, a silent signal that he didn't exist in their world. These moments, though small, accumulated into a pattern, and Big Shaq began to feel a mix of curiosity and unease. Other encounters were equally revealing. A middle-aged man brushed past him without a word, muttering under his breath as he passed. A couple at the next table whispered and giggled, clearly noticing him but choosing to ignore him entirely. Even staff members who were usually cheerful and attentive now moved past him as if he were part of the furniture. Big Shaq realized that the way society treats those perceived as ordinary or invisible could be harsh, dismissive, and sometimes even cold. Yet there were small pockets of kindness too. A young waitress offered him a refill without being asked, and a customer dropped a napkin near his table with a smile. These small gestures stood out vividly against the backdrop of indifference. They reminded him that even in a world where rudeness was common, moments of genuine humanity still existed, and they were even more powerful because they were rare. Each early encounter became a lesson. Big Shaq took mental notes, the rushed service, the ignored greetings, the subtle gestures of impatience. He began to piece together a picture of how people behaved when they didn't know someone's identity or status. It was both shocking and enlightening. The people he had once assumed were naturally polite now revealed their true selves, or perhaps the masks they wore only in front of fame and authority. By the end of these early encounters, Big Shaq felt a growing mix of emotions. There was disappointment at the lack of courtesy, amusement at the absurdity of some interactions, and fascination at the psychological patterns emerging before him. The stage was set for the more intense and revealing moments yet to come. The undercover experiment had begun to show its true power, and Big Shaq knew that the most shocking revelations were still ahead. As the afternoon wore on, Big Shaq noticed that the initial subtle rudeness he had observed began to escalate. What had started as curt glances and small acts of indifference now became bold, unfiltered displays of impoliteness. People who seemed polite when he was recognized as a celebrity now revealed a side of themselves that was raw, harsh, and sometimes cruel. The contrast was shocking, and it hit him harder than he had anticipated. The first major confrontation occurred when a group of diners arrived and were seated near him. One of them accidentally spilled a drink on the table while laughing loudly. Instead of apologizing to the staff or acknowledging the mistake, the group complained in an exaggerated, annoyed tone, blaming the restaurant rather than taking responsibility. Big Shaq's heart sank as he watched the staff handle the situation with patience and professionalism. It was the same staff who, when serving him in his true identity, often received laughter and friendly banter, but here, they faced irritation and dismissive attitudes. Another shocking moment came when a regular customer, someone he had known for years, walked past him without so much as a glance. They muttered something under their breath, clearly assuming he was just another homeless person loitering near the restaurant. The realization stung. Familiarity, fame, and kindness could vanish in an instant, replaced by judgment and apathy. Big Shaq couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment, not for himself, but for the stark truth it revealed about human behavior. Then came the truly astonishing incident. A delivery worker carrying a large tray of food accidentally brushed past Big Shaq, knocking a small item off his table. Instead of pausing, apologizing, or even acknowledging him, the worker snapped harsh words accusing Big Shaq of being careless. The audacity and rudeness were unbelievable, and Big Shaq found himself holding back a mixture of laughter and disbelief. It was a moment that perfectly encapsulated the shocking impoliteness he had come to observe. Yet amid these confrontations there were flashes of humanity that caught him off guard. A young child accidentally dropped a napkin and, seeing it flutter near him, instinctively picked it up and handed it back with a shy smile. A waitress quietly offered him an extra drink without making a fuss. These small acts of kindness stood out like beacons, proving that even in a world where rudeness could dominate, compassion still existed, quiet, subtle, but undeniably powerful. Every encounter forced Big Shaq to confront the duality of human nature. He realized that people's behavior often depended on perception, status, and assumptions. The same person who might bow politely to a celebrity could completely disregard someone they deemed unimportant. It was a harsh but enlightening revelation, a social mirror reflecting both the worst and the best sides of society. By the end of the afternoon, Big Shaq felt a whirlwind of emotions, disbelief at the audacity of some, appreciation for the small acts of kindness, and curiosity about what the rest of the experiment would reveal. The confrontations had gone beyond mere observation. They had become a deeply personal and eye-opening journey. He was no longer just testing others. He was learning, reflecting, and preparing for the moments that would shock him even further in the hours ahead. After hours of quietly observing, Big Shaq finally took a moment to step back and absorb everything he had witnessed. Sitting alone in the corner, he leaned slightly forward, resting his elbows on the table, and let his mind replay the series of interactions he had endured. The restaurant, which had once felt familiar and comforting, now seemed like a stage where the hidden sides of human nature were performing. Sometimes cruel, sometimes kind, and often unpredictable. A wave of introspection swept over him, and he realized that this experiment had become far more personal than he had anticipated. For a long time, Big Shaq had taken the world at face value. He had assumed that most people were inherently polite and kind, that social norms would guide behavior even when no one was watching. But today had shattered those assumptions. The casual dismissals, impatient gestures, and outright rude comments had left a mark on him. He began questioning why human beings sometimes allowed small prejudices, assumptions, or laziness to dictate their treatment of others. How many times had people ignored someone in need simply because they didn't recognize them or deemed them unworthy of attention? How often had kindness been reserved only for those who fit into society's acceptable mold? As he reflected, Big Shaq also thought about his own life. Fame, popularity, and public recognition had often shielded him from the harsher side of human behavior. People smiled, greeted him warmly, and sometimes went out of their way to please him. But was that their true nature, or just a response to his celebrity status? The experiment had revealed a truth he couldn't ignore. Respect and decency were not automatic. They had to be cultivated, and even then they were fragile, disappearing as soon as recognition or status vanished. Yet, amid the disappointment, Big Shaq found moments of profound clarity and hope. The few acts of genuine kindness he had witnessed, the child handing him a dropped napkin, the waitress offering him an extra drink, shone brighter because they were unexpected. They reminded him that human decency existed independently of fame, status, or assumptions. In a world where rudeness and indifference were often amplified, small gestures of compassion were immensely powerful, and perhaps even more important, because they were rare. These moments gave him a renewed appreciation for the quiet, everyday acts of humanity that often go unnoticed. The self-reflection extended beyond just observing others. Big Shaq also thought about his role in society and how he could use his platform to highlight these truths. This experiment wasn't just a personal curiosity anymore. It had become a social statement. By revealing the ways people treat strangers or those perceived as less important, he could spark conversations about empathy, patience, and respect. The idea that a single individual could inspire broader reflection on human behavior weighed heavily on him, and it also motivated him to continue documenting the experience with honesty and sensitivity. Emotionally, Big Shaq felt a strange combination of exhaustion, sadness, and enlightenment. There was the physical fatigue from hours of acting, observing, and suppressing his natural instincts. But more importantly, there was the emotional weight of seeing people's true colors, sometimes disappointing, sometimes heartening, but always revealing. He realized that the world was neither entirely good nor entirely bad. It was a mixture, a spectrum, and everyone played a role in shaping the social atmosphere around them. Even the smallest choices, a smile, a nod, a word of kindness, could tip the balance toward positivity. As he sat there quietly, Big Shaq made a personal vow. He would not let the rudeness define his view of humanity. Instead, he would use it as motivation to encourage kindness, empathy, and understanding wherever possible. The experiment had shown him the fragility of social etiquette, the biases hidden behind polite facades, and the importance of genuine human connection. It was a lesson he would carry forward, not just as a celebrity, but as a person striving to make the world a little better, one small act of decency at a time. By the end of this reflective pause, Big Shaq understood that the experiment had succeeded far beyond his initial expectations. It was no longer just about observing behavior. It was about learning, growing, and recognizing the complexity of human nature. He had glimpsed the harsh realities, the rare kindness, and the social truths that often remain hidden beneath surface appearances, and with that understanding he prepared himself for the final phase of the experiment, revealing his identity and witnessing the reactions that would undoubtedly mix surprise, guilt, and wonder, a moment that would bring everything he had experienced full circle. The final moment had arrived. After hours of silently observing, reflecting, and documenting human behavior, Big Shaq knew it was time to step out of the shadows and reveal himself. His heart beat faster than ever, not with fear but with anticipation. The restaurant, now humming with casual conversations and clinking cutlery, was about to become the stage for the most revealing part of his experiment. He adjusted his hoodie, straightened his cap, and prepared for the moment when the world would see that the ordinary, invisible figure they had ignored all day was, in fact, the man behind the fame. Big Shaq stood up slowly, feeling every eye on him as he approached the staff and customers he had watched so intently. For a split second, he almost questioned himself. Would they be angry, embarrassed, or even shocked into silence? The uncertainty made his pulse quicken, and then with a deep breath he pulled back the cap, smoothed his hoodie, and let his identity shine through. "It's me, Big Shaq," he said with a calm but commanding voice. The reactions were immediate and electric. Some staff members froze, their eyes wide with disbelief. A few gasped, unable to comprehend that the man they had barely noticed all day was the owner and a famous personality they had always admired. Customers whispered among themselves, some laughing nervously, some covering their mouths in astonishment. The tension in the air was palpable, a mixture of surprise, guilt, and admiration. Big Shaq smiled, not out of vanity, but out of sheer curiosity to witness their genuine, unfiltered reactions. One by one, staff members approached him, stammering apologies and explaining that they hadn't recognized him in his disguise. Their voices wavered between embarrassment and relief, and some even laughed nervously at their own behavior. Customers who had been rude or dismissive earlier shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their assumptions and judgments had been completely misplaced. The moment became a mirror, reflecting not only their surprise but also the subtle shame of how appearances had influenced their actions. Yet, amidst the shock, there was laughter, excitement, and a sense of connection that Big Shaq had not anticipated. People began sharing their astonishment openly, some even recounting the small acts of kindness they had shown him without realizing who he was. It was a moment of revelation not just for them but for him as well, a living proof of the lessons he had observed throughout the day. Human behavior could be flawed, impulsive, and unfair, but it was also capable of warmth, generosity, and genuine care. Big Shaq took this opportunity to speak candidly to everyone present, explaining why he had gone undercover and what he had hoped to learn. He spoke of empathy, kindness, and the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of who they were. The restaurant, which had witnessed moments of rudeness, impatience, and indifference, now became a place of reflection, laughter, and understanding. People listened, realizing that this was more than a simple experiment. It was a lesson in humanity. The public response outside the restaurant was equally overwhelming. As the video of Big Shaq's undercover adventure went viral, millions watched with fascination. Viewers were captivated by the genuine reactions, the shocking behavior of some, and the quiet kindness of others. The story sparked discussions online, with people debating politeness, empathy, and how they treat strangers in everyday life. Big Shaq's experiment had transcended entertainment. It had become a social mirror, showing society both its flaws and its moments of grace. By the end of the day, Big Shaq reflected on the journey with a deep sense of satisfaction. The experiment had not only revealed truths about others but also about himself. It showed the power of observation, empathy, and reflection. It demonstrated that even small acts of kindness could stand out in a world often dominated by indifference. And most importantly, it reminded him and everyone who watched that behind every face, familiar or unknown, lies a story deserving of respect. As he left the restaurant that evening, Big Shaq felt a quiet triumph. The undercover adventure was complete. The lessons were learned and the reactions had been priceless. The world had seen the experiment, and now it was up to each person to carry the message forward. Politeness, empathy, and human decency are choices we make every day, and they define the kind of world we live in. The revelation had been more than dramatic. It had been transformative. After the revelation and the initial shock had settled, Big Shaq found himself reflecting on the deeper consequences of his undercover experiment. The day had been more than a social experiment. It had become a journey into the human psyche, a mirror showing the truth behind appearances, and a test of his own patience, empathy, and understanding. As he left the restaurant that evening, the sun casting long shadows across the street, he realized that the experiment didn't end when he revealed himself. The true impact would unfold over days, weeks, and even months, as people processed their reactions and the lessons it carried. In the days that followed, Big Shaq noticed changes, not just in the world around him but within himself. The experience had sharpened his awareness of human behavior, teaching him to look beyond surface impressions. He understood that every interaction, no matter how small, carried significance. A smile, a kind word, or a small gesture of patience could transform someone's day, while rudeness or indifference could leave a lasting sting. This realization made him more observant, more intentional, and more conscious of the way he treated others in his daily life. Social media erupted with responses from viewers who had watched the video. Millions shared their astonishment, shock, and in some cases, guilt. People began posting about their own experiences with politeness, empathy, and human judgment. Some admitted they had treated strangers poorly, only to reflect on it after seeing Big Shaq's experiment. Others were inspired to act more kindly, to pause and consider their behavior before reacting. It was clear that the video had sparked a conversation far bigger than anyone could have anticipated, showing the ripple effect of one simple yet bold social experiment. Big Shaq himself felt a mixture of pride and humility. The pride came from successfully executing the experiment, capturing authentic reactions and delivering a message that resonated globally. The humility stemmed from witnessing the fragility of social behavior, the ease with which politeness could vanish, and the rarity of genuine human kindness. He realized that while he had conducted an experiment, life itself was full of these small, untested moments every day, moments where behavior was a choice, and character was revealed. Reflecting further, Big Shaq understood that the experiment had also strengthened his connection to his staff, patrons, and fans. Employees who had been caught off guard by the revelation expressed renewed respect and loyalty, and customers shared their stories, laughing at their own mistakes and feeling inspired to change. Even he noticed a subtle shift within himself, a deeper empathy, a patience for human flaws, and an appreciation for small gestures of decency that he might have overlooked in the past. In private, Big Shaq journaled about the experience, documenting every emotion, thought, and insight. He realized that this undercover adventure had been a rare opportunity, a chance to step outside of fame and privilege and see the world from a completely different perspective. It had been uncomfortable at times, even heartbreaking, but it had also been enlightening, empowering, and unforgettable. The lessons extended far beyond the walls of his restaurant. They applied to every human interaction, every social encounter, and every moment when kindness could be extended or withheld. Ultimately, Part 8 of the story was about legacy. Big Shaq recognized that the true success of the experiment wasn't in the shock value or the viral moments. It was in the conversations, reflections, and subtle shifts it inspired. It was about reminding people that human behavior is a reflection of choice, that appearances can be deceiving, and that empathy, respect, and kindness are the most powerful forces in any society. As he looked back on that day, he felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had not only entertained millions but also left a lasting impact, encouraging the world to pause, observe, and act with greater humanity. Weeks had passed since Big Shaq's undercover experiment, but the ripples it created were far from over. What began as a single day of observation had grown into something much larger, a phenomenon that sparked conversations, debates, and reflection far beyond the walls of his restaurant. Big Shaq sat in his studio one evening, scrolling through social media, reading comments, watching clips, and noting how profoundly people had reacted. It was clear that his simple idea had touched something universal, the desire to be treated with respect, and the curiosity about how humans behave when appearances are stripped away. Big Shaq noticed patterns emerging in the responses. Some people admitted that the video had made them reconsider how they treated strangers in their everyday lives. "I realized I ignore people too often," one comment read. "It's a wake-up call." Others shared stories of kindness, inspired by the small gestures in the video, a waiter's patience, a child's innocent help, or a subtle smile extended to someone who seemed invisible. The experiment had ignited a conversation about empathy, and Big Shaq realized that the impact of his actions extended far beyond entertainment. Even within his own community, changes became visible. Staff members reported that they were more mindful of customers and even of each other. Regular visitors to the restaurant shared that they had paused to reflect on their own behavior. Some came back with notes of appreciation or small tokens of gratitude, inspired by the video to extend kindness intentionally. Big Shaq began to see a subtle yet meaningful transformation. The awareness of human behavior he had captured had spread, and people were actively choosing to behave differently. This ripple effect wasn't limited to small gestures. News outlets, podcasts, and online forums picked up the story, analyzing the psychological insights of his undercover adventure. Experts discussed how fame can shield individuals from the raw truths of human behavior, and how social status can create a distorted perception of politeness. Schools and community groups even shared the video to illustrate lessons about respect, empathy, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. Big Shaq marveled at how one simple experiment, done in a single restaurant, had resonated so deeply across society. Reflecting on the ripple effect, Big Shaq realized that this journey had also reshaped him in unexpected ways. The day of the experiment had tested his patience, empathy, and observation skills, but the weeks following had reinforced a deeper understanding of human psychology. He saw how subtle actions could influence behavior, how judgments could be challenged, and how moments of kindness, even tiny ones, could spark chains of positivity. It was a lesson not only about others but also about himself, about the responsibility of influence, the power of example, and the importance of carrying awareness into everyday life. Big Shaq also began thinking creatively about how to expand this experiment. He envisioned future challenges, social experiments, and public initiatives designed to inspire reflection and empathy on a larger scale. The idea of going undercover had become more than a stunt. It had become a movement, a reminder that society often overlooks the humanity of ordinary people. He realized that the ripple effect could grow indefinitely, reaching corners of society he had never imagined, and perhaps planting seeds of genuine change in unexpected places. In quiet moments, Big Shaq reflected on the complexity of human behavior. The contrast between rudeness and kindness, indifference and empathy, had left an impression that would stay with him forever. He understood that while the viral moments captured attention, the subtle lessons, the ones people internalized quietly, were far more important. This realization strengthened his belief that his work as a public figure could go beyond entertainment. It could influence hearts, challenge assumptions, and inspire change in ways he had never considered before. As part 9 of his journey came to a close, Big Shaq sat back feeling a mixture of pride, humility, and motivation. The experiment had started as a curiosity, a test of human behavior, but it had evolved into something much greater. It was now a catalyst for reflection, a conversation starter, and a lesson in empathy that could influence countless people. The ripple effect was real, tangible, and ongoing, and Big Shaq knew that this was just the beginning. The story of that day, of his disguise, and of the shocking truths he had uncovered would continue to inspire, provoke thought, and remind the world that respect and kindness are choices we make every single day.